My name is Emily Ashworth, and for 32 years, I believed my sister when she said I was too cold, too ambitious, too focused on my career to ever find real love. I built an empire believing I was destined to be alone. But that night, the night I walked into her wedding reception as the new owner of everything she thought, she claimed everything changed. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to prove your worth to people who should have seen it all along. Growing up in Ashland, Oregon, a place where old money whispers through wine country estates, I learned early that in the Ashworth family, there was only room for one shining star, and that star was never me. My sister Cordelia was everything our father, Harrison Ashworth, valued. Charming, socially graceful, effortlessly beautiful. She had this way of lighting up a room that made everyone forget there was anyone else in it. Including me, I was the afterthought, the serious one. The one who spent Friday nights with financial reports instead of at country club galas. While Cordelia was homecoming queen, I was valedictorian. While she dated the quarterback, I was building my first investment portfolio at 16. Vivian's brilliant, of course, father would say at dinner parties, but brilliance doesn't keep you warm at night. Then he'd smile at Cordelia, who would flutter her lashes and say something charming about how career women, like me, were just too intimidating for most men. After graduating summa cum laude from Stanford Business School, I founded Meridian Strategic Investments. By 28, I'd built it into one of the most exclusive private equity firms on the West Coast. We specialized in acquiring undervalued properties and transforming them into luxury destinations. Success tasted like champagne and felt like silk, but it was a lonely feast. 3 years ago, during our annual Christmas Eve dinner at the family estate, Cordelia made her grand announcement. She swept into the dining room in a scarlet dress that cost more than most people's cars, her engagement ring catching the chandelier light like a disco ball. "Everyone, I have news," she announced, not waiting for the conversation to pause. James proposed. James Whitmore, heir to a shipping fortune, devastatingly handsome, and absolutely perfect on paper. Everything father had always hoped one of his daughters would marry. "My darling girl," father beamed, rising to embrace her. "This is magnificent news. James is exactly the kind of man who deserves an Ashworth woman." The emphasis on an Ashworth woman wasn't lost on me. Neither was the fact that he didn't even glance in my direction. "We're thinking next Christmas for the wedding," Cordelia continued, her voice carrying that musical quality that had always made everything she said sound like poetry. Something absolutely magical. I've been dreaming of Rosehaven Manor since I was a little girl. Rosehaven Manor. Even I had to admit it was stunning, a Gilded Age estate turned luxury wedding venue, perched on the hills overlooking the Rogue Valley. It was also booked solid for the next 3 years and cost more than most people's houses. "Rosehaven?" Mother gasped. "Cordelia, darling, that's impossibly exclusive." "Nothing's impossible for our Cordelia," father declared. "I'll make some calls." "That's..." When Cordelia's eyes found mine across the table. "You know, Emily, you should really think about settling down soon. You're not getting any younger, and career success can only fill so many empty spaces in a person's life." The table fell silent. Even our housekeeper, Maria, paused in clearing. "The soup course." "I mean," Cordelia continued, her smile sweet as poisoned honey, "some women are just meant to be alone." "There's nothing wrong with that. You've built such an impressive business. Maybe that's enough for someone like you." "Someone like you." The words hit me like ice water. "Cordelia," Mother said softly, but she didn't really sound reproachful. More like she was gently correcting a child who'd stated an uncomfortable truth too bluntly. "What I'm just being realistic. Emily is brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but she single quotes S dot dot intense, intimidating. Most men don't want a woman who's more successful than they are. It's just how the world works." Father nodded thoughtfully. "There's wisdom in knowing yourself, Emily. Some people are meant for family life, others for dot dot other pursuits." I set down my wine glass with deliberate precision. You're right, Cordelia. I am intense. I am intimidating. And I am incredibly successful. But you're wrong about one thing. What's that? You think those qualities make me unlovable. I think they make me unforgettable. I excused myself from dinner and drove back to my penthouse in Portland, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Not from hurt I built immunity to their casual cruelty years ago. From rage. Over the next year, I watched from the sidelines as Cordelia planned what she called the wedding of the century. Every family gathering became a detailed briefing about flowers, dresses, catering, and guest lists. Father spared no expense, treating it like a coronation rather than a wedding. Rosehaven Manor has agreed to host us next December, Cordelia announced at Easter dinner. It's going to be absolutely perfect. 300 guests, a string quartet, and the most divine winter wonderland theme you can imagine. I smiled and made appropriate noises, but inside I was taking notes. Because while Cordelia was planning our perfect day, I was planning something else entirely. You see, during my research into luxury venue acquisitions, I discovered something interesting. About Rosehaven Manor, the owners are bleeding money. Their insurance premiums had skyrocketed after a kitchen fire the previous year, and they were leveraged to the hilt with maintenance costs on the historic property. They weren't just booking weddings. They were desperately booking weddings. I reached out to my contacts and confirmed what I suspected: Rosehaven Manor would be quietly going on the market within 18 months. The family who owned it were third-generation proprietors with no business sense and a lot of pride. They'd hold out as long as possible, but eventually they'd have to sell. I could wait. That summer, everything changed. I was at a charity auction in San Francisco, bidding on a Rothko for my office when I noticed him. Tall, dark-haired, with the kind of understated confidence that comes from genuine accomplishment rather than inherited position. He was bidding on the same painting we drove the price up to an almost ridiculous amount before I finally conceded with a gracious smile. After the auction, he approached me. "I hope you're not too disappointed about the Rothko," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus Chun." Marcus Chun. I'd heard the name. He was a tech entrepreneur who'd sold his AI company to Google for an obscene amount of money and was now investing in sustainable luxury developments. Brilliant, self-made, and devastatingly attractive in a way that had nothing to do with conventional good looks. "Vivian Ashworth," I replied. "And I'm not disappointed at all. I have excellent taste in art, which means you do too." He laughed, a genuine sound that made something inside my chest flutter unexpectedly. "Would you like to get coffee and discuss our excellent taste?" Coffee became dinner. Dinner became a weekend in Napa. The weekend became the most intense, intellectually stimulating relationship of my life. Marcus wasn't intimidated by my success. He was fascinated by it. He wanted to know how I built Meridian, what deals had taught me the most, what my 5-year expansion plan looked like. When I talked about market projections, his eyes lit up. When I explained a particularly complex acquisition strategy, he asked follow-up questions that showed he understood not just the mechanics, but the artistry of what I did. "You're incredible," he said one evening as we watched the sunset from his Narren County home. "I've never met anyone who thinks like you do." Cordelia would say that's exactly the problem, I replied, surprised by my own honesty. "Who's Cordelia?" I told him about my family, about growing up in the shadow of someone everyone loved more, about the casual cruelty disguised as concern. I told him about Christmas Eve dinner and my sister's prediction that I'd always be alone. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She was wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "You're not meant to be alone. You're meant to be with someone who deserves you." 6 months later, he proposed with a ring that made Cordelia's engagement diamond look like a piece of costume jewelry. Not because it was bigger, because it was perfect. A rare pink diamond surrounded by smaller stones. Vintage Art Deco setting. Absolutely unique. Just like he said I was. When I announced my engagement at Thanksgiving dinner, the reaction was, "Interesting." "How wonderful, darling," Mother said. But her smile seemed strained. Father examined Marcus like he was assessing. A business proposal. Tech money, he said finally, as if that explained something unsavory. But it was Cordelia's response that revealed the most. For just a moment, just a flicker, I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before when she looked at me. Envy. "It's so sudden," she said carefully. "How long have you known each other?" 8 months, I replied. That single quotes as ... fast. For someone like you. I mean, someone so careful about everything. The implication was clear. I was so desperate to prove her wrong that I'd rushed into an engagement with the first man who'd shown interest. When you know, Marcus said easily, his arm around my waist. Besides, Emily's not the type to waste time on anything that isn't exactly right. Cordelia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Over the following weeks, it became clear that having both Ashworth daughters engaged simultaneously was causing some kind of cosmic disturbance in the family dynamics. Suddenly, every conversation became a comparison. Cordelia's wedding was larger, but mine was more exclusive. Her dress was more expensive, but mine was designed by someone more prestigious. James was old money, but Marcus was new money and lots more of it. "I do hope you're not planning anything too close to Cordelia's date," Mother said during one of our increasingly tense family dinners. "It would be such a shame to overshadow her special day." Overshadow. As if my happiness was somehow dimming. Cordelia's spotlight. "Actually," I said, "Marcus and I were thinking of something very intimate, maybe in the spring." Which was true. We talked about a small ceremony at his home in Marin, just family and close friends. Something elegant and personal, nothing that could compete with Cordelia's elaborate winter wonderland. But Cordelia wasn't satisfied with non-competition. She wanted capitulation. "You know," she said, cutting her lamb with surgical precision, "I've been thinking about what you said at Christmas. About being unforgettable. Here it comes, I thought. I realized you were absolutely right. You are unforgettable. But maybe not in the way you hoped." The table went silent. "I mean, people remember you, Emily. They remember the woman who chose work over family, success over relationships, money over love. They remember the ice queen who built an empire but couldn't build a marriage until she was 32 and probably running out of time." Each word was placed with careful precision, designed to cut the deepest. "That's enough," Marcus said quietly, but with an edge that made everyone look at him. "Oh, I'm sorry," Cordelia said, all innocence. "I didn't mean to offend. I just think it's important to be honest about these things. Emily values honesty." "You're right," I said calmly. "I do value honesty." "So, let me be honest." I stood up, placing my napkin beside my plate with the same deliberate precision I used in boardrooms. "You're afraid, Cordelia. For the first time in your life, you're not the only bride in the family. You're not the only daughter making headlines. And you can't stand that maybe, just maybe, someone might look at my wedding and think it's more interesting than yours." "That's ridiculous," she laughed, but it sounded forced. "Is it?" "Because it seems to me like you're working awfully hard to make sure I know my place. To make sure everyone remembers that I'm the afterthought, the one who got lucky, the one who had to settle for whatever she could get." I leaned forward slightly. "But here's what you haven't figured out yet, sister dear. I didn't settle. I won." I kissed Marcus on the cheek and walked out, weaving behind a silence so thick you could have cut it with a cake knife. That night, Marcus found me on the balcony of my penthouse, staring out at the city lights. "Your family is ... double quotes," he began. "Toxic, manipulative, emotionally abusive disguised as loving concern." I was going to say complicated, but those work too. He wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Tell me what you need." "I need to not care what they think." "But you do care, unfortunately." "Then let's do something about it." I turned in his arms. "What do you mean?" "You said your sister is getting married at some fancy place called Rosehaven Manor?" "Yes, why?" His smile was slow and absolutely wicked. "Because I think I'd like to see this place. Maybe we should take a drive up there this weekend." The next morning, I made some calls. Rosehaven Manor was indeed in financial trouble, worse than I'd initially thought. The owners were 3 months behind on their loan payments and facing foreclosure within 90 days. Marcus and I drove up to Ashland that Saturday, ostensibly to visit the family, but actually to scout Rosehaven Manor. It was even more beautiful. Then I remembered a sprawling Italianate villa surrounded by manicured gardens and vineyards. With a ballroom that looked like something out of a fairy tale. It was also clearly struggling. The gardens were slightly overgrown. Some of the outbuildings needed paint. And there was a general air of genteel desperation about the place. "It's stunning," Marcus said as we walked through the public areas. "Imagine what you could do with this place with proper investment." "I've been imagining exactly that," I admitted. He stopped walking and looked at me. "You want to buy it?" "I've been tracking it for months. It's going to market privately in the next 60 days. "Before your sister's wedding?" "About 6 weeks before." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then he started laughing. "You're brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I haven't done anything yet. But you're going to..." It wasn't a question. The next 8 weeks were a carefully orchestrated dance of timing, negotiation, and strategic patience. Through intermediaries, I made contact with the Rosehaven Manor owners, the Beaumont family, who'd run the venue for 3 generations and were heartbroken about losing it. I didn't lowball them. I offered them exactly what they needed to pay off their debts and retire comfortably, plus a bonus for agreeing to complete all bookings through the end of the year before transferring ownership, including Cordelia's wedding. "Why are you being so generous?" Eleanor Beaumont asked during our final negotiation meeting. "You could probably get this place for half what you're offering." "Because I'm not interested in taking advantage of your misfortune," I said honestly. "I'm interested in preserving something beautiful and making it profitable again. I think we can do that together." What I didn't mention was that the extra money I was paying was a small price for the guarantee that Cordelia's wedding would proceed exactly as planned right up until the moment I chose to reveal my ownership. The sale closed on November 15th, exactly 5 weeks before Cordelia's December 20th wedding date. Legally, Rosehaven Manor belonged to Meridian Strategic Investments, which meant it belonged to me, but I wasn't done yet. Marcus and I decided to get married on December 19th, the day before Cordelia's wedding. Not to upstage her, but because it felt right. Small ceremony, immediate family only, at Marcus's home overlooking the bay. When I called to inform my parents, Mother's response was predictable. "The day before Cordelia's wedding? Emily, that seems deliberately provocative." "It's the day that worked best for our schedules," I said calmly. "Marcus has business in Tokyo the following week, and I have a major acquisition closing in January," which was true. I had several acquisitions closing in January, including the official public announcement of the Rosehaven Manor purchase. "Well," Father said when he got on the line, "I suppose if you're determined to have some small ceremony, that's your choice. Just don't expect anyone to be able to attend. We'll all be busy with final preparations for Cordelia's wedding." "I understand." "Completely," I said. "Family priorities." The irony was perfect. Marcus and I were married in his garden at sunset, with 20 people who actually mattered to us in attendance. My business partner Sarah stood as my maid of honor. Marcus's brother flew in from London to be his best man. It was intimate, elegant, and absolutely perfect. We spent our wedding night at the St. Francis in San Francisco. And the next morning, we drove to Ashland for Cordelia's wedding. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked as we pulled into the Rosehaven Manor parking area, which was bustling with activity. "Once you do this, there's no going back." I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The wedding was everything Cordelia had dreamed of, and everything Father's money could buy. The manor had been transformed into a winter wonderland, with white roses, silver accents, and enough twinkling lights to be seen from space. 300 guests in formal wear mingled in the great hall, while a string quartet played classical pieces. Cordelia looked absolutely radiant in a Vera Wang gown that probably costs more than most people's cars. James looked appropriately besotted. Father beamed like he was personally responsible for orchestrating the love story of the century. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a midnight blue silk dress that Marcus had bought me in Paris, and the pink diamond earrings that matched my engagement ring. We made quite an entrance, not because we were trying to, but because we simply were the kind of couple that commanded attention. "Vivian!" Cordelia swept over to us, her smile bright enough to power the Christmas lights. "You look lovely. Though I have to say, that dress seems awfully formal for someone who just had a tiny ceremony yesterday." So the family gossip. Network had been busy. "Congratulations on your marriage," she continued, not waiting for me to respond. "How sweet that you managed to find someone willing to settle down with you after all." "Thank you," I said graciously. "And congratulations on your beautiful wedding. Rosehaven Manor is absolutely stunning." "You chose well, didn't I?" Of course, it helps when money is no object. Father spared no expense for his favorite daughter's special day. The emphasis on favorite daughter was subtle but unmistakable. "It's a remarkable venue," Marcus said easily. "The architecture, the grounds, the history. It must cost a fortune to maintain a place like this." "Oh, I wouldn't know about that." Cordelia laughed. "That's not my concern. I just had to choose the most exclusive, most beautiful venue in Oregon, and here we are." "Here we are indeed," I agreed. Dinner was served in the grand ballroom, with Cordelia and James at the head table surrounded by the wedding party and immediate family. Marcus and I were seated at what was clearly the miscellaneous relatives table, far enough from the action to make our status clear. During the salad course, Father stood to give his toast. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom. "Tonight we celebrate not just the union of two wonderful young people, but the continuation of a legacy. Cordelia has always been the light of our family, the daughter who understood that true success isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in love, family, and the connections that bind us together." I felt Marcus's hand find mine under the table. She chose a man worthy of her grace, her beauty, and her generous heart. She chose a venue that reflects her impeccable taste and her understanding that some things, the most important things, can't be bought. They can only be earned through a lifetime of being the kind of person others want to celebrate. The applause was thunderous. Cordelia positively glowed. "Some people chase success," Father continued, his eyes finding mine across the room. "Others embody it. Tonight, we celebrate a daughter who knows the difference." More applause. Several people turned to look at me, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to smug. That's when I stood up. The ballroom gradually quieted as people noticed me rising from my chair. Marcus squeezed my hand, once a silent question, and reassurance rolled into one. I squeezed back. "I hope you'll forgive me for interrupting," I said, my voice clear and calm. "But I wanted to say something while we're all gathered together in this beautiful place." Cordelia's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile remained fixed. "Father, you're absolutely right about some things being earned rather than bought. And Cordelia, you're right that I'm unforgettable, though perhaps not for the reasons you think." I paused, looking around the room at the faces staring back at me. "You see, 18 months ago, I learned that Rosehaven Manor was in financial trouble. The Beaumont family, who had run this incredible venue for 3 generations, were facing foreclosure. They were going to lose everything." A murmur started to ripple through the crowd. I also learned that this venue meant the world to my sister, that she'd been dreaming of getting married here since she was a little girl. So I made a decision. Cordelia's face had gone very pale. I bought Rosehaven Manor, not as an investment, not as a business acquisition, but as a wedding gift. For my sister. The murmur became a buzz. People were looking between Cordelia and me with obvious confusion. The sale closed 5 weeks ago. Every detail of tonight's celebration, every rose, every twinkling light, every moment of magic, it's all happening on property that I own. Property that I purchased specifically so that Cordelia could have her fairy tale wedding. The silence was deafening. But here's the thing about fairy tales, I continued, my voice never wavering. They're not about getting what you want. They're about getting what you deserve. I looked directly at Cordelia, who was staring at me with something approaching horror. You deserve a beautiful wedding, sister. You deserve to feel like a princess for one night. You deserve to be surrounded by people who love you, in a place that takes your breath away. And you have all of that. I paused. What you don't deserve is to spend that wedding night believing you're better than the woman who made it all possible. The silence stretched so long I could hear the string quartet tuning their instruments in the next room. So here's my wedding gift to you, Cordelia. The truth. I reached into my evening bag and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table in front of me. This is the deed to Rosehaven Manor with your name on it. As of midnight tonight, this venue belongs to you. Completely, legally, permanently. Along with a trust fund that will cover maintenance, taxes, and operational expenses for the next 50 years. Cordelia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. You were right about one thing, I said, my voice gentle now. I am too intense, too ambitious, too focused on my career to be satisfied with just being someone's wife. I am also too successful, too generous, and too forgiving to be limited by your small understanding of what love looks like. I turned to address the room. My husband and I were married yesterday in a simple ceremony that costs less than tonight's flowers. We'll spend our honeymoon working on sustainable development projects in Costa Rica. We'll build a life based on partnership, respect, and shared purpose. And someday, when we have children, we'll teach them that success isn't about being better than other people. It's about being better than you were yesterday. I picked up my evening bag and took Marcus's arm. Enjoy your wedding night, Cordelia. Enjoy your new venue. And enjoy your new understanding of exactly who your sister really is. We walked out of that ballroom with every eye in the room following. U.S., no one said a word. Not Cordelia, not James, not mother or father. Not a single one of the 300 guests. The only sound was our footsteps on the marble floor and the distant strains of the string quartet, who had apparently decided the show must go on. We were almost to the parking area when I heard running footsteps behind us. Vivian, wait! I turned to see Cordelia, her wedding dress hiked up in her hands, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Why? She gasped. Why would you do this? Do what? Give you the most generous wedding gift in the history of weddings? You. Know what I mean? Why did you humiliate me like that? I studied her face, really looked at her for maybe the first time in years. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something fragile underneath that I'd never noticed before. Something desperate. I didn't humiliate you, Cordelia. I set the record straight, but everyone will know now. Everyone will know that I didn't, that it wasn't. That you didn't earn this yourself? That father's money couldn't actually buy you the most exclusive venue in Oregon because it was already owned by your sister. She nodded miserably. Good, I said softly. Maybe that will teach you the difference between being given something and deserving it. I don't understand you, she whispered. I never have. You have everything: success, money, power, a husband who looks at you like you hung the moon. Why do you need this too? I don't need this, Cordelia. I never did. But you need to understand that the sister you've spent 30 years underestimating is the same sister who just handed you a multi-million-dollar property because she loves you enough to want you to be happy. I reached out and gently wiped a streak of mascara from her cheek. I also need you to understand that I'm done being your emotional punching bag. I'm done being the family disappointment. I'm done pretending that your approval matters more than my own self-respect. Vivian, I hope you have a wonderful marriage, Cordelia. I hope James makes you happy. I hope you turn Rosehaven Manor into something magical. But I won't be there to see it. What do you mean? I mean, this is goodbye. Marcus and I are moving to San Francisco permanently. We'll send Christmas cards and wedding gifts, but I won't be attending any more family gatherings where I'm treated like a consolation prize for showing up. You can't just leave the family. Watch me. I kissed her forehead gently, the way I used to when we were children. And she'd had a nightmare. Be happy, Cordelia. You finally have everything you ever wanted. Try to figure out why it doesn't feel like enough. Marcus and I spent our honeymoon in Costa Rica, working with local communities to develop sustainable ecotourism initiatives. We stayed in tree houses and ate fruit. We picked ourselves and fell asleep to the sound of howler monkeys and rain on the canopy. It was the opposite of luxury. And it was absolutely perfect. No regrets? Marcus asked one evening as we watched. The sunset from our platform high in the trees. About which part? Any of it. The wedding, the confrontation, cutting ties with your family. I considered the question seriously. Below us, the jungle was alive with sounds I was just learning to identify. Above us, stars were beginning to appear in a sky so clear it looked like black silk scattered with diamonds. I regret that it took me 32 years to understand my own worth, I said finally. I regret that I wasted so much time trying to prove myself to people who were never going to see me clearly. I regret that Cordelia and I will probably never have the relationship we might have had if she hadn't been raised to see me as competition instead of support. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret showing them exactly who they were dealing with. And I definitely don't regret walking away from people who confused cruelty with love. Marcus pulled me closer. Your sister called. When? While you were in the village this morning, she left a message. I was quiet. For a moment, what did she say? She said to tell you that Rosehaven Manor had its first booking for next year. A young couple who specifically requested it because they heard about the woman who gave her sister a castle. Apparently, they want their wedding to be at the place where that kind of love happened. Despite everything, I smiled. She also said she's thinking about turning part of the manor into a retreat center for women entrepreneurs. She wants to call it the Emily Ashworth Center for Women Who Don't Apologize. She didn't. She did, and she said she finally understands the difference between being given something and earning it. She wants to earn this. I felt tears prick my eyes. Maybe there's hope for us after all? Maybe. But either way, you did the right thing. How do you know? Because you're not the same woman who walked out of that ballroom 6 months ago. You're lighter, freer. You laugh more. You don't check your phone during dinner to see if your family is called. He was right. Somewhere between Costa Rica and our new life in San Francisco, I'd stopped waiting for their approval and started living for my own joy. I love you, Mrs. Chun, Marcus said, using my new name with the reverence some people reserve for prayers. I love you too, I replied. And I love who I am when I'm with you. Who are you when you're with me? I thought about it as the jungle settled into its nighttime rhythms around us. I'm unforgettable, I said finally. But not because I'm cold, or intimidating, or too successful for love. I'm unforgettable because I finally learned that the right person doesn't make you smaller to fit into their world. They expand their world to make room for all of you. Last week, I received an invitation in the mail. Heavy cardstock, elegant calligraphy, expensive paper. The Emily Ashworth Center for Women Who Don't Apologize cordially invites you to our grand opening celebration. Inside, a handwritten note from Cordelia. Sister, you were right about everything. It took me 2 years to understand what you meant about earning versus being given, but I finally get it. Rosehaven Manor now hosts 12 women's entrepreneur retreats per year, alongside our wedding business. We're booked solid through 2027. More. Importantly, I wake up every morning knowing I'm building something meaningful. James and I are expecting our first child in September. We'd like to name her Emily, if you'll allow it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm hoping you might come to the opening celebration anyway. Not because we're family, but because you're the reason any of this exists. I finally understand what you meant when you said you won. You didn't just find love. You found yourself. And in finding yourself, you saved me too. Your sister who's still learning. Cordelia P.S. Father asks about you constantly. I think he's finally figured out which daughter he should have been bragging about all along. Marcus found me on. Our deck, reading the letter for the third time. Good news or bad news? He asked, settling beside me with 2 glasses of wine. Complicated news, I said, handing him the invitation. He read it, his eyebrows rising with each line. Your sister named a feminist business retreat after you? Apparently, and she wants to name her daughter after you. So she says, and your father is finally acknowledging your existence? According to Cordelia. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the fog roll in over San Francisco Bay. Are you going to go? I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks some bridges are better left burned. What does your gut tell you? I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, brilliant, successful, and absolutely convinced that she had to choose between love and respect. I thought about the woman I was now, still brilliant, still successful, but finally secure enough in my own worth to extend grace to people who'd never extended it to me. My gut tells me that forgiveness isn't about them deserving it. It's about me being strong enough to give it. Then you have your answer. I leaned against his shoulder, watching the lights of the city begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk. I have something better than an answer, I said finally. I have a choice. And for the first time in my life, I get to make it from a position of strength instead of need. So I think I'll go. Not because I need their approval or their apology, but because the woman who bought her sister a castle and walked away with her dignity intact is strong enough to walk back in and see what they've built with the foundation she provided. Marcus kissed the top of my head. That's my girl. Unforgettable. To the end. 3 weeks later, we drove up to Ashland for the grand opening of the Emily Ashworth Center for Women Who Don't Apologize. The grounds of Rosehaven Manor had been transformed yet again, this time into something that looked like a cross between a luxury retreat and a feminist think tank. Cordelia met us at the entrance, visibly pregnant and glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from purpose rather than performance. You came, she said, and her voice was soft with wonder. I came, I agreed. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I, until this morning. She looked at Marcus, then back at me. Thank you. For everything. For the manner, for the truth, for showing me what real strength looks like. You're welcome. Now show me what you've built. The center was incredible. Conference rooms named after female entrepreneurs. A library stocked with business books by women authors. Co-working spaces designed for collaboration and networking. The old ballroom had been converted into a presentation hall where a group of 20-something women were giving pitch presentations to a panel of female investors. We host women from all over the country, Cordelia explained as we toured the facilities. Tech entrepreneurs, artists starting galleries, women launching nonprofits. Last month, we had a cattle rancher from Montana who wanted to start a sustainable beef cooperative and a former Wall Street executive who was launching a microfinance company for women in rural communities. It's impressive, I said, and meant it. The first woman who ever stayed here told me something I'll never forget, Cordelia continued. She said, your sister didn't just give you a building. She gave you a blueprint for what it looks like to be powerful and generous at the same time. That's when I knew what I wanted to do with this place. We ended up in the garden where Father was holding court with a group of local businessmen, explaining the center's mission with the same pride he'd once reserved for James's pedigree. Vivian! He called when he saw me, breaking away from his conversation. There's my brilliant daughter. Come meet the mayor. He's been wanting to discuss your sustainable development model. My brilliant daughter? Not my other daughter or Cordelia's sister. My brilliant daughter. It was such a small thing, and yet it felt like winning the lottery. Hello, Father, I said, accepting his embrace. I owe you an apology, he said quietly while the mayor was distracted by Marcus's explanation of our Costa Rica project. Several apologies, actually. I spent so many years trying to fit you into a box that I forgot to notice you'd already built your own palace. We all make mistakes, I said diplomatically. Some mistakes are bigger than others. I'm proud of you, Emily. I should have said that 30 years ago, but I'm saying it now. I felt something inside my chest loosen a knot I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. "Thank you," I said simply. Later, as the sun was setting over the Rogue Valley, Cordelia found me sitting alone on the terrace where I'd confronted the family 2 years earlier. "Penny for your thoughts?" she said, settling beside me with 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "I was thinking about Christmas Eve dinner 3 years ago," I said, "when you told me I'd never find love because I was too intimidating." Cordelia winced. "I was awful to you." "You were afraid of me," I corrected. "There's a difference." "Why were you so threatening to me?" I considered the question carefully. "Because I represented everything you'd been taught to believe was wrong. With ambitious women. I was successful, independent, and unapologetic about it. In your worldview, that should have made me miserable and alone, but it didn't. No, it made me powerful. And that scared you because it meant everything you've been told about the price of female ambition was a lie." Cordelia was quiet for a long moment, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "I was so jealous of you," she said finally. "Even when I was being cruel, even when I was trying to tear you down, I was jealous. You never needed anyone's permission to be yourself. You never apologized for taking up space. You never made yourself smaller to make other people comfortable, and you always did until now." I really looked at her and saw something I'd never seen before. Strength. The kind that comes from surviving your own mistakes and choosing to do better. "I'm proud of you," I said, "for what you've built here, for who you've become." "I learned from the best," she said, bumping my shoulder with hers. "My big sister who bought me a castle and then taught me how to deserve it." An hour later, I found myself standing in front of 200 women in the presentation hall, holding a microphone and looking out at faces that ranged from curious to inspired to slightly starstruck. "I'm told you want to hear about the night. I gave my sister a castle," I began, and the room erupted in laughter and applause. "But that's not really the story I want to tell you tonight. Because the night I gave Cordelia, this place wasn't about castles or revenge or even generosity. It was about understanding the difference between proving your worth and knowing your worth." The room quieted. "For 30 years, I tried to prove I was valuable. I built companies, made money, achieved every goal I set for myself. But I was building. All of it on a foundation of other people's opinions. I was successful, but I wasn't free." I paused, finding Marcus in the crowd. He smiled and nodded encouragingly. "The night I walked out of my sister's wedding, I wasn't just giving her a gift. I was giving myself permission to stop performing for an audience that was never going to applaud. So here's what I want you to take away from tonight. Your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. Your value doesn't fluctuate based on market conditions or family dynamics or societal expectations. You are not too much, too little, too loud, too quiet, too ambitious, or too anything." The applause started slowly, then built to a crescendo. "You're exactly enough, exactly as you are, exactly right now. And anyone who can't see that is simply revealing the limitations of their own vision." I looked around the room at these remarkable women entrepreneurs, artists, dreamers, builders. Build your empires, ladies. Build them tall and strong and beautiful. Build them for yourselves, not for approval. And when people tell you you're too intimidating, too successful, too powerful, for love, smile and say thank you. Because those aren't criticisms. They're compliments. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Afterward, as Marcus and I were getting ready to leave, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, with the kind of nervous energy that reminded me of myself at that age. "Miss Chun," she said tentatively, "I just wanted to thank you for everything you said tonight, but also for showing us what it looks like to win." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you didn't just get revenge on people who hurt you. You transformed that hurt into something beautiful. You turned your pain into other people's power. That's not just winning, that's alchemy." I thought about that as we drove back to San Francisco, Marcus's hand warm in mine. The lights of the city spreading out below us like fallen stars. Alchemy. The transformation of something ordinary into something precious. Maybe that's exactly what the last 3 years had been, not just a revenge story, but a transformation story. The woman who had walked out of that ballroom had been brilliant but broken, successful but starving for recognition. The woman driving home tonight was still brilliant, still successful, but finally free. Have you ever had to choose between peace and family? I said into the darkness, practicing the words I'd say to close this story. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is walking away. But sometimes the most powerful victory is walking back, not because you need their approval, but because you're strong enough to give them your grace. I squeezed Marcus's hand and smiled. Sometimes justice whispers and still echoes forever. Have you ever had to choose between peace and family? Sometimes the most powerful revenge is walking away. But sometimes the most powerful victory is walking back, not because you need their approval, but because you're strong enough to give them your grace. If my story resonated with you, hit like, subscribe to Silent Revenge, and share your truth. In the comments, tell me about a time you chose your own worth over someone else's opinion. Tell me about the moment you stopped performing and started living. Because sometimes justice whispers and still echoes forever. This is Emily Chen, reminding you that you are not too much for the right people, and the wrong people don't matter. Until next time, keep building your castles and never apologize for being the queen of your own kingdom.